two current stories that give us an indication that institutional power is maneuvering in ways that perhaps have a history, but certainly seem to be somewhat modern phenomena, to me at least, is the whistleblowers over at ABC claiming that Kamala was given the questions in advance, and that debate was to some significant degree stage managed. And if you add to that the sort of the endorsement of a couple of hundred former Bush staffers and the sort of welcome embrace of the Cheney family endorsements by Kamala, do you see that for me that shows you that there are sort of ulterior currents that are moving beyond the livery of what was once assumed to be bipartisan American politics, i.e. if the Cheneys, who were once the antipathy of Democrat Party politics when they were being condemned for the what should be illegal Gulf War, and now the endorsement is now welcomed. And if the debates can be so sort of incredibly well managed, is that an indicator of where real power is, Vivek? Can we start to detect the outline, at least, of the sort of real body politic that is being preserved and respected, and how its power is visible in the movements of famous families, in the way that debates are conducted in apparently neutral circumstances, in addition to what we've talked about already, the Orwellian capture of language evident in a phrase like aggressive neutrality, a kind of neutrality that didn't seem to be present in those debates, for example?
Yeah, so look, I think that, again, you're hitting on one of the core political realignments underway here in the country. You talk about where the power center is and what's going on. Let me talk about the political realignment aspect of this, and then we'll come back to the media part in a bit. And the political part of this, the Cheney, both Dick and Liz Cheney heading for Kamala Harris, is actually an embodiment of the same type of defecting Democrats who are going for Donald Trump. The realignment going on is this. Back in the 2000s, when Dick Cheney was enemy number one of the Democratic Party, the kinds of issues they wanted to argue about were substantive issues ranging from what should abortion policy be to, at that point, a GOP that wanted to engage in foreign interventionism, which, by the way, I opposed at the time as well. I was in college. But the Iraq War, we want to go fight foreign wars. We, have strong pro-cultural federal policies that we would implement here. I think there was a strong cultural divide on those kinds of issues. Okay. What's happened right now is really interesting. Demonize the likes of George Bush and Dick Cheney for their strong pro-life, anti-gay marriage views, etc. What do you get now is you get a Republican Party that the Democrats from back then would have only wished for if in the policy views of Republicans. Right now, Donald Trump, the Republican Party today has no opposition to gay marriage. It is opposed to a federal ban on abortion, does believe it should be a states' rights issue as a pro-life view, but no federal ban on abortion, no federal or state constraints on gay marriage. And so it's precisely when supposedly the evil views of the Republican Party no longer are the actual part of the policy platform of the Republican Party that they've now resorted to other histrionics, where the political field has now realigned itself. What they now want is actually the people who just want government to retain control, period. Right, the Dick Cheneys of the world, but also the Kamala Harris and the Joe Bidens of the world, say that, okay, we might disagree on some of those other cultural questions, but we do agree that people can't be permitted to speak or express their opinions. We do agree that the government needs to be able to surveil everyday citizens to make sure that they're not expressing those opinions and wreaking havoc or danger. We do believe in the importance of the United States meddling and interfering in random countries' affairs, even when they don't advance the interests of the United States, as long as it actually enhances the power structure of the people who are doing the meddling. That actually is a deep alignment between the Kamala Harris, Joe Biden wing of the Democratic Party and the Dick Cheney and the Liz Cheney wing of the Republican Party. So that's an alliance that actually runs deeper than what was their former antipathy on issues relating to gay marriage or abortion. Meanwhile, you got Donald Trump leading a Republican Party right now that has opposition to a federal ban on abortion. The Republican Party does not favor, under Donald Trump, or a ban on abortion, a federal ban on abortion. That was also my position during the presidential campaign, by the way. And you also have a party that's completely open to same-sex marriage, to really the kinds of freedoms that many libertarians would at least appreciate. Yet what we are committed to is actually a view that says we can express our opinions freely, that we don't want that surveillance state, and we don't want the United States creating or aiding and abetting foreign conflicts that don't advance American interests. That's a deep realignment that's going on. And so in some sense, I got pushed back after the debate. I was in the spin room, and I was pointing to all the Democrats defecting from the Democrat Party coming over to Trump. They said, but the same thing's happening the other direction. You see Republicans defecting to go for Kamala Harris. That almost proves the point about the deeper realignment that's going on in the country. And I think we'll look back 10 or 20 or 30 years from now as this is a significant catalyst in American history and the history of American politics for the kind of principles-based realignment that we haven't seen in a long time.
When you say about you list the various authoritarian aspects of the current Democratic Party and the new tectonically shifting alignments that appear to be taking place, I'm minded of an idea that was recently described to me of how social democracies more easily move towards totalitarianism than the ideologically explicit forms of centralized control of the last century, Soviet communism, National Socialism, fascism. That social democracy, in its increasing regulatory capacity, is moving towards a totalitarianism that's unprecedented simply because I suppose communism had goals towards global control, so did National Socialism, but it was not likely to be implemented without sort of extreme military endeavor. Now there's an ideological capture that you see taking place in sort of bizarre outlier events, like whether it's the Olympic opening ceremony or more observable economic phenomena like agricultural control and attempt to centralize and land ownership and food production. The war against free speech is in full swing. We are the vanguard, bravely fighting back. Rumble's the home of this channel, Stay Free, and a leader in defending the fundamental human right of free speech. They've joined X to sue a cartel of advertisers and ad agencies who conspire to block ad revenue from going to the platforms. Recently, they've launched Rumble Premium. This, I think, is going to be a game changer for all of us. It's an ad-free viewing experience with great perks for viewers and creators. Rumble Premium will give you the ability to dive into your favorite content on your mobile or desktop or smart TV and savor every uninterrupted second of my content. Why don't you upgrade to Rumble Premium today? Support my free speech and the free speech of other content creators on this platform. Please go to Rumble now, rumble.com/premium. And if you use the code BRAND, you'll save $10 and Rumble will be aware that our stream is creating great converts. So that's rumble.com/premium and do use the code BRAND to save $10. Anyway, there's a link there at the bottom of the screen now. We're posting it in the chat. Join up. I wonder, Vivek, how your opponents will be able to continue to say that Project 2025 and the idea that there is some kind of Handmaid's Tale style Christian patriarchy, mass authoritarianism leading to mass deportation, control over women's reproductive rights, winding back the clock, when it seems now to me sort of evident, just because of legislation, because of public rhetoric, because of the increase of surveillance, that the greater threat is this bureaucratic technological feudalism rather than militaristic, patriarchal, old school strongman 2025 stuff. I wonder how these arguments are going to be rebutted. And I wonder what your position is on something like 2025, and if you can give us some insight on why social democracy tends towards totalitarianism.
Yeah, look, I think that, there's a deep philosophical reason, I think, why social democracy tends to lead to totalitarianism. But let me say a word about even just you talk about Project 2025. Let's talk about Project 2050, which is effectively what the Great Reset on a global scale is really all about. And you want to know one of the vectors that they're using to achieve that, not as some theoretical policy construct, it's constraining people today, is the climate change agenda. This is a third rail you're not supposed to touch. I actually, in the book, the book's coming out, the book that's out this week, this is a core topic that I hit, Russell, because this is a third rail where if you veer even from factual terrain to miss some sort of fact here or there, you're done. So in the chapter in the book that I actually put the most factual layers of confirmation, reconfirmation, had people steel man it, red team it from every side was this chapter, because this is really the vehicle that they're using to create a global governance structure of totalitarianism, not even limited to the United States of America, limiting the way that we live our lives, flogging ourselves for the modern way of life and the success of the West, while completely failing to apply those same shackles or standards to places like China. So anyway, back to your point, this is the vision of the Great Reset. You don't have to call it Project 2025 or Project 2050. They call it, Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum vision is to call it the Great Reset, the dissolving of barriers between the public sector and the private sector to accomplish what neither could on its own. The dissolving of boundaries between nations to combat shared global challenges that either nation could not combat on its own. You saw a bit of this in the rise of the global response to the COVID-19 pandemic, but that really just laid the groundwork. They lost the excuse once the virus had mostly dissipated, and they tried to cling on to it for as long as they could. But it really laid the groundwork for now doing that at a larger and more lasting scale via the impositional global climate change agenda. A couple of facts there that I thought was actually just useful for people to wake up out of the lull that they lull you into. Why does social democracy lead to totalitarianism? Well, one of the answers is that people have an inherent nature in us, all of us do, to at times behave like sheep, right? In some sense, we want to bend the knee to something. It's part of human nature. But there's also a rebellious side of us that doesn't. But I think the reason that they're able to do it is they lull you into submission by appealing to the part of your human nature that wants to bend the knee, especially at a time when you don't believe in God or where you've seen the recession of faith, which I do think is a deeper undercurrent in all of this. When you stop believing in true God, you start believing in false gods instead. That also greases the wheels, and it's times in loss of faith and the recession of religion that you do see that trend from social democracy to totalitarianism accelerate. Also, a theme that's deep and central to the book that I wrote. The first two chapters are about the revival of faith and the rise of the climate religion. These two things are deeply, inextricably intertwined for how we're able to create this new type of global technocracy. But anyway, the reality of how we combat it, I think, is twofold as well. One is you got to see it for what it is, use the tools of representative democracy to fight and push back. That's what I think this election's about. You got to fight based on the facts through free speech and open debate. We're not playing on an even playing field, which means we have to hold ourselves to an even higher standard in those arguments about climate change policy or otherwise. It's one of the things I've tried to do in the book. But I also think there's a deeper cultural fix we need, which is the revival of true belief and conviction in the things that are bigger than ourselves. The revival of faith and patriotism and belief in your nation without apologizing for it, and the family as a grounding institution of your own identity. Those, I think, will actually have greater power to awaken the side of us that gives us the self-confidence to stand back. But when we lose our identity grounded in our family, when we lose our sense of faith or belief in a higher power, when we lose our sense of conviction in our nation and allegiance to our nation, then we no longer have the individual fortitude to be able to push back against the otherwise inevitable march to this type of soft tyranny. And I do think that that's a part of the solution that sometimes we skip over, we forget. We remember what we're fighting against, but we often forget what we're fighting for. And I do think that we as human beings require that grounding forms of our identity that even in our anti-establishment movement, even in the modern conservative movement in America, it's important that we not forget those deeper grounding institutions and values of individual, family, nation, and God that give us the possibility of having the fortitude of actually standing up against the otherwise inevitable march of the global Great Reset, the march to domestic totalitarianism in the United States. And I think that's an important part of the equation that we sometimes risk skipping over.
Our new The Oracle series, our first ever group interviews designed to bring the greatest and most authoritative voices in particular subjects together for the very first time. Robert Malone, Dr. Pierre Corey, and Steve Kirsch.
What we've experienced is a globally deployed psychological bioterrorism playbook. It's well developed.
And then I started to see just global propaganda directed at essentially distorting, dismissing, and suppressing the evidence of efficacy. And I saw it as a crime.
And at that point, I knew that this was not just a coincidence. There were too many black swans over too short a period. I've never heard anything like this story in my life.
They seem to get the human psyche so well when it comes to brainwashing us and propagandizing us to the direction that they want us to go in, that you would think that they would know that pulling all of these various tactics would actually just push support towards Trump, not away from him.
Ryan Ruth, some of his posts even show that he appeared to have been working with, in his own words, the U.S. Embassy in Kiev. He's doing effectively military intelligence, human trafficking of terrorists.
It's in this context that I think Ruth was kind of radicalized. He decided that while he wanted to assassinate Putin, the easier thing would be to assassinate Donald Trump.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you want to see more uncensored content where free speech can flourish, join our live stream. Click the link right here to watch the next video if you want to, or become a member of a growing movement. Download the Rumble app and you'll be informed every time we make a new piece of content. Stay free.